Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Hive in Session. As always, I'm your host, Ben, and I'm really pleased to be joined by another Ben on the show this morning. It's Ben Hallett. Ben, thank you very much for joining me today.
Lovely to join you. Thank you.
Excellent. And do you want to give us a very, very brief intro to kind of who you are and what you do, Ben, for people who might not be familiar with you?
So my name's Ben Hallett. I work for Hanover Scotland. We're a housing association based in Scotland, provide housing for predominantly older people right across the country. My role is to run the communications team, run other bits, but it's largely focusing on all of the kind of external, internal engagement and the stuff we do with residents, marketing and activities like that.
Fantastic. And I suppose that's an excellent place for us to jump in, because the topic of today's discussion is going to be sort of how you kind of, I suppose, pioneered, if we're not using too grandiose a term for it here, the kind of move from, I guess, calling what you're doing internal comms and kind of rebranding that as internal engagement, Ben. Is that right?
Yeah. So obviously, being from a comms background, branding is quite important, but it's also about the way we think about it and the way that top level managers think about it, and just saying, going away from putting out a message to having a conversation. That was kind of the focus of where we wanted to start from.
I like the sound of that. And sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, and the thing is that it's amazing how the smallest changes. It's one word that changes, but it changes your whole approach to how you look at something.
I think so, because when you think about, whenever I think about the word communications, I watch a lot of football, right? And you always think about the sort of, when the big teams put something out, it's always official communication. And it is just a one-way, it's a statement, right? It isn't like, oh, like the manager's been let go, but we'll let you decide if we follow up with that decision or not. Whereas, the whole idea of engagement is that it is this two-way thing. It is this kind of co-authorship, this crowdsourcing of information. And, I think it lends itself well to being a lot more of a listening exercise as much as it is a talking exercise, right?
Yeah. And one of the kind of things that kicked it off is that obviously we've been doing some work with Hive on surveys, but we introduced something, the Hive system, which is like the kind of staff recognition. We've had staff award schemes. So I've been with Hanover 7 years. I ran the staff award scheme for 4 years. And it was never really particularly going. And we got 600 staff right all over the place. Like we've got small offices. It's two or three people, a lot of them. And there wasn't, and then people weren't engaged with it. They weren't wanting to do anything with it. And suddenly Hive showed us a way of saying, oh, actually, yeah, everybody, the energy that it created was like, I saw that energy and was like, what more can we do with the energy that we've got from this single thing that we've done?
And I mean, was it just as simple as kind of, a platform that sort of opened this up for people and made it easier? I mean, was there sort of oftentimes we see sort of peer-to-peer being brought in along a bit more of like a sort of, I guess, a relaunching of cultural values. I mean, was there anything that kind of accompanied that piece?
I mean, it's funny because it just kind of happened slightly in isolation. So been an organization in flux. We've got a new chief exec and a couple of new directors. That only happened this year, but Hive's launched, I think, about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's been that kind of picking up of pace of that. It was something that one of my colleagues introduced, and it wasn't even introduced by the comms team. We don't run Hives, but they showed us it, and it was like, look at these amazing comments. And the commitment of people, like I told myself early on, I'd commit to doing one a month. And actually, the feedback I got from the people I gave them to, it was just like they were coming back to me. Hives is meant to be almost like a one-way thing, but actually it was a two-way conversation already. And it was like, I could just see something. I could sense something out there. There's something really different with this. And the figures were just, we could not believe the number of people who were doing it. Like I said, I ran the staff awards scheme. We're getting 35 or 40 nominations. Suddenly Hive were getting 50, 60, 70 high fives a month. And that's not huge, but you add it up over the course of a year and it's an amazing number of people getting involved.
Definitely. And it's interesting what you say there, Ben, about like because there is, and people don't talk about it, but there is this element of reciprocity to peer-to-peer feedback, like you get one and, you perhaps send somebody's DMs to say like, oh, thank you very much. And, that kind of provokes a bit of a conversation, but then, likewise, it sort of makes you think that made me feel really nice. I would like to make somebody else feel as nice. And it just, especially, I mean, I don't know if as a workforce, your guys particularly relate to this, but, we have become slightly more siloed in the way that we work, and, people due to a lack of proximity, we aren't super aware of what's going on in other parts of the organization. And it's a good way to kind of disseminate that information and kind of, let people know all the good that's happening.
Yeah, we struggle because we've got 120 odd sites across Scotland, and these are often quite remote. So it's normally, it can just be a manager and a cleaner working at one site. They don't get much interaction with someone else. So suddenly if they get a high five, it's a bit of interaction that goes, and they'll have done something for someone, obviously, to earn it. But it's just that interaction starts to build the network. And we've tried all sorts of stuff. We've got a newsletter, and we ran staff conferences, which sound great, but we probably managed to get about 200 of 600 people. That's not a bad result, but it's still 400 people who aren't engaged in the process. Hive Fives has engaged more than that. And it just opened this conversation for me. I was like, well, let's make this a two-way conversation. Conferences, classic comms. There wasn't any conversation. There was a message going out. It was like, well, what's the message we're trying to talk about this year? Rather than saying, what do we want to hear from staff? It was very much saying, what do we want to tell staff? And so over the last kind of 6 months, I've been more and more thinking, right, I don't want to tell staff anything. I want to ask them. And it's not just about surveys, because a survey is just it's a moment in time. I want this ongoing conversation.
Yeah. So I suppose then, let's run with that for a minute or two then, if we can then, Ben. So, you've made this decision. We're going to make it a bit more of a two-way conversation. We've seen, that from High Fives and stuff, that there is an appetite for people to say more things and be more actively involved in, comms or engagement in the business. Like, what are we looking like now? Kind of where are you moving towards with stuff like that?
So we started with, I'm looking at the structures we have now. Obviously, we have a staff suggestion scheme that is middling, not particularly successful. We're going to use the Hive Five platform to extend to Open Door, which is a way of doing staff suggestions where people can actually engage with top level managers. And it's got a bit of an anonymity, so you're not caught up in something. If you've got to say something sensitive, you don't feel too exposed when you're doing it. So there's that. There's also about one of the problems we've had is digital devices. A lot of our staff are cleaners. They probably work maybe 15, 20 hours a week. They've got access to a computer. They don't use it. They don't have access to anything else. And we've got care staff on some of our sites who are busy delivering care. And part of the thing we're doing is giving everybody a digital device and making sure that they can access all the different things we're doing through that device. We want to try, I don't know if you've heard of something called Yammer. It's part of the Teams Office suite. We want to use Yammer as like a conversation space. It's almost a bit like a work social network. So there's all this amazing technology that's been around before, but suddenly we've just realized with everything that's going on, it's like, right, there's time to really look at this. And it's not that one thing has made us think about it. It's not related to the circumstances of the time. It's these are great products, and here's something we can do for our staff. I know that we've got this issue. You mentioned silo working. We have a real issue with silo working because we're so drawn out across lots of different places. And the only way to challenge that is to talk to the people, but let them, them talking back. It's just it's amazing the suggestions you get, the simple ones. But we probably haven't been hearing that. And it's time just to go, all right, what do you think the best way to fix this is? Because almost always the best solutions come from the front line, not from the top.
I mean, just from a sort of a personal situation, I can really relate to that at the minute. So that particular line really resonates with me there, Ben. I mean, I like that. And, this is something that we speak to people who, might not be kind of already utilizing things like this. And, of course, there are other, providers and platforms and stuff available. It just so happens that you guys use us, right? And I think that, do you feel that sort of just by giving people this channel that there kind of always has been an appetite there, and it is just that now people feel more free to be more forthcoming?
Well, it's interesting that I come from a slightly different perspective in that I was running a research project where I was out and about a lot. And I was visiting developments, I was doing one-on-one interviews with our residents, but also with staff. I got to hear stuff on the ground, which I never would have heard sat in my office. And actually, it's given me a different perspective on what staff want. And there were so many ideas. That we know that there are good ideas there, but there were so many opinions out there, and they don't feel like their opinion is always important, but it really is. because they get to talk to customers on a day-to-day basis. A lot of these staff, they really know what needs to happen, and the energy, there's so much energy and they work so hard that actually bringing that back into the center gives the whole organization a different level of energy, and it's just kind of a motivation to say, this is why we do this. The stories you hear from particularly from the high fives, we've got a thing where we've got a monthly newsletter. We just put a single high five in it. It's not got a name attached to it. It's just a nice comment that someone's made, and other people come back to me and say, that was a really nice story. That was, it made me realize why we do what we do. So it's not just about feedback, it's also about understanding and motivating staff to say, yeah, we do a good job, we're working for the organization that we want to work for.
That's quite a, I haven't heard of that particular use for it before. I like that it's like we'll anonymize one of these areas of positive feedback, and we'll include it in something that goes out to everybody so that everybody can kind of share in it, right? And we do talk about it being a way to reinforce culture and values and stuff, but then kind of also the overall mission, as you've said there.
And it clarifies the mission, because it'll be the simplest comment. It'll say that, you did this for this person and I realized it was something really good. Or you bring an energy to the workplace every morning and it helps me. If I'm struggling in the morning, it helps you think, yeah, actually, this is the energy I need today. And it's those kind of stories of these individuals who might be isolated, but their energy we can all harness and understand that it can help us do a better job. And that part of it is that I talked about the whole moving to engagement. That for me is the engagement. It's that we didn't hear those stories before. Now we're hearing those stories more. We might have heard the isolated story of someone really wanted to highlight, they might write a letter in, but now it's the easiest way just to go bang, okay, yeah, I want to talk about this. And the story is really it's just really flowering and really giving us something we didn't have before.
I mean, that's really great to hear. And I'm interested in, just to go back to a point that you made there, is when you were sort of, let's say, more like traveling based, you were getting around, you were hearing kind of stories and things firsthand. Like, what would you say, was there a time where you sort of thought that was all that you needed, and kind of you've now kind of challenged that attitude through kind of access to high fives and open door and things? Or did you kind of feel at the time like there is still something missing from this? Because and this is probably more of an indulgent question than anything, it's just kind of a lot of the conversations that I've had has been with people who they might be quite new to this type of thing, and they feel that their one-to-ones are very much where the engagement effort starts and ends, and they're maybe a little bit like they're not as open to a different or a new or an alternative kind of way as they might be.
And it's interesting that for me, I'd already been out and about a little bit in my previous job. The job I was doing, though, it was understanding a bit more of the challenges that faced everybody. And what I really took away from it is that I wished that others could understand it as I understood it. There was one thing where I was doing some research in a development in the north of Scotland, and I sat in the office it's a care development. I sat in the office with the management team for 3 days. And I just saw everything about how it was going on. But what they were able to do was, I was working for the chief executive. They were able to feed back to me, and I was able to take it back to her. And suddenly I was like, oh, hang on, there's a route here for someone to say something. And we didn't really have that route before. It's the classic that where everybody has a complaints procedure, but not everybody has a compliments procedure. And you talk about having a compliments process, but you don't really have one. And suddenly, it's not just all about all the bad things that happen. You learn more from the positive than the negative a lot of the time, because we want to learn the good practice rather than saying, oh, well, how do we do this wrong? And all the high fives is bringing through all this good practice, but it's opening that opportunity for people who just, like I said, didn't always get heard before to get heard suddenly. And it's just that the messages are flowing both directions, and we're able to get a better handle on what is going on. And it feels really good. That's the genuine feeling. When I've had a number of high fives, I cannot tell you how good it feels. It's lovely. And then always, I have a team, so often it's one of my team I feel guilty who's done the work, and I get the credit. And I make sure I pass the comments on. But it's lovely to know that people are recognizing, because, for example, we've got a health and safety manager. He is the unsung hero. And unsung being the important one. You'd never hear what he's doing, but suddenly with the high fives, all the comments are coming in that saying, oh, he's doing an amazing job. He comes out, he sees us, and he's not always doing health and safety. Sometimes he's that engagement person because he's actually out visiting someone. He's got to go to visit them. He doesn't just go and tick off a list. He goes and he has a chat with them. And that's what I learned from going out, is that when I went out, I was going out to visit a resident. I'd always go and see the staff members and just have a chat. Even the cleaners cleaning, I'll chat with them for 5 minutes just to give them that opportunity to see someone. Because otherwise management is just, they used to call it the ivory tower. We sit in the ivory tower, and that was something that we needed to break down. And so when I was given the opportunity to change the message and the language, I was like, bang, great, let's do it.
Amazing. I like that, man, Ben. Well, look, I feel like I've taken up enough of your valuable time already. I guess we'll close out with this. Like, do you have any kind of final thoughts that you'd care to leave us with?
I think the biggest one is, where there is energy, take that energy and harness it. The high fives is really positive. We can see more that we can do with it. We changed our staff awards off the back of that, and much better results, much better response, because people recognize that it was something, a power for good. And when you have a power for good, don't be afraid to use it.
Fantastic. That is a mint place to leave it. Well, Ben, thank you very much for coming on with me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. And thank you, everybody, for watching another episode of Hive in Session. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.